So good morning, everyone. Thank you for coming. My name is Nadeem Abdo, and this is my colleague Gaurav Daga. We're members of the remote desktop virtualization team in Windows Server, and we're very, very excited to be here this morning to present to you on the new remote desktop experience in Windows Server 8. So there's a lot that's new. This is a very exciting release. We feel it's a pretty major release with a lot of innovations, a lot of improvements. Can I get a quick show of hands? How many of you have experienced the new Metro-style remote desktop client? Okay, quite a few. So we're really excited about that, but that is really only just scratching the surface. There's a lot more to the release, and we're going to be taking the time today to walk you through some of the major new capabilities and innovations that are there. And specifically, what we're going to drill into is three major areas of the remote desktop experience. We're going to talk about the new improved graphics remoting capabilities. We will talk about the new Metro-style remote desktop application and new interaction methods such as touch and device redirection capabilities. And then we're very excited to also talk about the ability to deliver that remote desktop experience across a wide range of networks. And all these things will be backed with a lot of really cool demos, including stuff that you have not seen yet, even if you have had the opportunity to experience both Steven Sinofsky's keynote demo as well as the demo yesterday in Mike Neal's presentation. We do plan to leave time for questions at the end, so if you have any, please hold them, and we'd be happy to try to answer them. So with that, before we dive into what's new, it's useful to set some context about the road so far and kind of how we think about the remoting space. The last several releases have really included a lot of incremental improvements and innovations in making the remote experience closer and closer to the local experience. And that's really a goal that we have, is to enable our users to be able to use Windows remotely and have a terrific experience without compromise if you're doing that. And so 2 releases ago in 2008 R2, we introduced major new capabilities like multi-monitor, with the ability to remote up to 16 monitors, and the ability to remote media content efficiently, in particular for content that was played through applications like that use Media Foundation or Direct Show. And then most recently, in the 2008 R2 SP1 release, we integrated a really powerful technology called RemoteFX that really enabled us to deliver very efficient remoting of a rich desktop, including media content and 3D content from applications that use DirectX. And that was predominantly focused on the LAN type scenarios. So we've been continuously improving it. We still have the goal of delivering a terrific experience for remoting, but we really wanted to look at how we can go even further with Windows 8 and how we can remove any of the kind of trade-offs that you had to make, such as, for example, having a great remote experience but requiring a LAN network. In addition, Windows 8 is a major release that brings major new considerations. And so as we set about thinking about the investments and new technologies that would be delivered, we really looked at these 3 major factors that would affect the remote experience. First, the bar doesn't stay the same. It really has gone up. If you've seen, as I'm sure many or all of you have, the new Metro experience, it is fast and fluid. It is beautiful, it is animation rich, graphics have become more complex, both in the operating system desktop itself, as well as applications. And we certainly expect to see that as applications take advantage of the new technologies, the new HTML5 that is accelerated, the new XAML-based system, and certainly the whole system now leveraging the power of DirectX. And so this places a challenge for remoting in terms of delivering a great remote experience in light of that, but also an opportunity. Second, we've heard loud and clear from our users. They want to be able to work from anywhere, not just over LAN networks, but over networks that include mobile, 3G, connecting from distant sites across continents. And so that really is what we call the WAN area. And that's an area that we're excited to talk to you about today and show you some demos. And then thirdly, we've supported remoting from rich PCs. and we've supported remoting from thin client devices. But there's new classes of devices. You all now have the new Windows Developer Preview PC, and we're very excited to be able to deliver a new Metro-style remote desktop app and decent or great interaction capabilities for touch-friendly devices as well. And so we're going to be covering also some of the technologies that go behind that. So with that context, let's share what's new in remote desktop. I'm going to be going through 9 major things. There is a lot in this release. These are 9 of the top sort of key things, but there's still a lot more stuff under there. First, Remote FX for WAN. This is the technology that enables us to deliver the full fidelity, rich desktop across a wide range of networks. We'll be doing more drill down into this one specifically, both going a little bit deep in the technology as well as showing a demo. Second, Remote FX Adaptive Graphics. This is the evolution of our graphics remoting technology to be able to support remoting much richer types of content, remoting the full Metro-style desktop as well as applications, and also being very intelligent and adaptive to network and CPU. Remote FX Media Remoting. As I mentioned previously, we've had support for video remoting for MF and DShow. We've dramatically improved that. We can now offer the ability to remote many more types of content and use the latest generation standard codecs like H.264 to deliver terrific experiences at up to 90% bandwidth reduction. And so this whole first row really represents a summary of our desktop remoting experience, both for rich graphics as well as a wide range of networks. The next area is features that really increase the value of the experience. And so multi-touch remoting in the new world where we have a 3-input interaction, keyboard and mouse, which we've supported remoting, but touch becoming more and more important, we want it to be from the ground up able to remote that in a really great way. And so we support full multi-touch remoting, as was demoed in the keynote, and we will be showing a little bit more about that today. Our users want to use devices. And so we've offered, in the most recent version, USB redirection for VMs. We're pleased to now offer it also for sessions with improved capabilities. And then the Metro-style remote desktop app that really brings together all of these features and capabilities in a very easy-to-use, end-user-focused application. I do want to call out, we are still offering, in addition to that, the standard remote desktop app, the one that you may know of as MSTSC. And the way to think of it is both of these applications are built on the same engine and both offer the same features. And so you don't have to make a compromise or a trade-off. For example, full touch support is included in the standard desktop application as well. However, that application has more of a power user type UI and a lot more configurability, whereas the Metro-style application is a really easy-to-use application for end users. In addition to all of these features and technologies, we really wanted to deliver a no-compromises approach. So we really wanted to address any kind of gaps or trade-offs that might have existed in the past. And so when we looked at delivering the Metro-style experience, we wanted to be able to do that no matter what configuration users are running their hardware in. And so we are offering a choice. It is possible to deliver the full experience with no compromises using the software GPU, and that's what was discussed in the immediately preceding session, using the new Microsoft Basic Display Driver capabilities to offer the full desktop, full DirectX support without requiring a GPU in your server. However, if you are running very rich, graphically intensive DirectX applications, or have a scenario where it is beneficial or warranted, you absolutely can put a GPU in your server. And in Sessions' case, we will directly use that GPU with admin control, so the admin can opt between GPU or the software. And the equivalent in the virtual machine case with Hyper-V is it is also possible to leverage the power of the GPU using the Remote FX vGPU technology, which has also been evolved and and has many new performance improvements over the current release. So a lot of choice there on the graphics remoting front. Next, we wanted to offer all of these technologies equally for all of our deployment topologies. And so the same protocol, the same powerful features are available for virtual machines, sessions, and physical desktops. And finally, the technologies that we've delivered are certainly available when you're remoting from Windows 8 client, and we are definitely focused on making sure that they're available on thin clients as well. And there's a session coming up immediately following this that talks about the partner opportunities around that. So in sum, all of these things together deliver a fast and fluid remoting experience of the Windows Metro desktop across a wide range of networks and a lot of deployment options, really a no compromises approach. So we're very, very excited about that. And given the breadth of new capabilities and the new richness of the experience, we wanted to call out that we're calling the full fidelity remote desktop experience by the name RemoteFX. So this is more than just the previous release where RemoteFX was a piece of the technology. It now really represents the sum total of this full fidelity remote desktop experience. So before we dive into the demos, we wanted to do a little bit of a drill down into adaptive graphics to give you a feel for what that is, so that when you see the demos, you have a little bit more context. So this is a conceptual picture. It does not illustrate everything that is in remote adaptive graphics, but I want to make a few key points. First, the job of RemoteFX adaptive graphics is to take the applications and desktop that are running on the Windows 8 system and optimize their delivery for the network depending on whatever the network and CPU conditions are. And so that includes the evolution of all the technologies that were in the remote desktop protocol and RemoteFX to the next level. It includes the latest generation RemoteFX codecs. It includes new technologies like progressive rendering that we'll be detailing in an upcoming slide, but also very powerful new codecs that are optimized for text, very powerful codecs for media remoting, including standard codecs like H.264, and all packaged together in a system that dynamically senses what the network is doing, the CPU is doing, and makes optimal trade-offs for the user. So for example, if you're on a system where the network is your constraint, the system in RemoteFX will adaptively tune the encoding to work harder using more CPU to reduce the network bandwidth needed. But if the reverse is the case, where you might be on a corporate network and CPU is available and as well as network, then RemoteFX will essentially scale back its encoding using a little bit more bandwidth, but freeing up even more CPU to drive further scale. And there are many configuration options available in group policy for the administrator to opt one side or the other on these trade-offs, but there's a good balance that is automatically sensed for the user. So that's to recap, is that the RemoteFX adaptive graphics dynamically senses and adapts the encoding, as well as the right types of encoding based on the content and the network. It's really a much richer system than in the past, where there were many fewer codecs, or it was basically just one codec for all content. And to illustrate that, let's imagine sort of a prototypical example, and again, this is a conceptual image of remoting a web page. This web page is actually consisting of many different types of content. And whereas a previous version of the protocol may have used one encoding technique or a series of techniques like caching and then basically just one codec, in this generation, we really take it much, much further. And so content can be partitioned out and using optimized codecs. So the RemoteFX optimized text codecs can deliver a super low bandwidth but extraordinarily high fidelity graphics experience for text. Images can be progressively refined and transmitted with the RemoteFX codecs that are tuned for images, the successors, the next generation of the Callista codec, and progressive refinement features. And then any content that is fast-moving, such as videos, can be optimized and sent over with video-tuned codecs. And so you can achieve the best of both worlds in terms of trade-offs, delivering for the end user a really low CPU profile, but maintaining great experience for content that needs to remain sharp and clear, such as text. And this is to illustrate the progressive refinement. This is a concept that has existed in web browsers for a long time. Applied to the desktop remoting, we wanted to really take it a step further and make sure that it's done in such a way that only the portions of the screen that need to be refined, such as images, are, but text, if you notice, the leftmost frame, the most unrefined version, and this is, again, a conceptual picture, not a direct screenshot. The effect is actually much, much more subtle in the real system, and we'll be showing that in the demo. But the text, as you notice on the left-hand side, remains super sharp all the time. And so we have a little blow up here that shows that. Next, switching gears from graphics, and then we're almost to the first set of our demos, is the Metro-style remote desktop app. And so the thinking that went in there is we wanted to deliver an experience that is very friendly on touch device. So if you're on a slate, the Metro-style remote desktop app really will be very familiar to you if you use any other Metro-style applications. In fact, if you look at IE and you look at the Metro-style, IE being the Internet Explorer browser, and the Metro-style remote desktop app, you'll see a lot of parallels and analogs. And this is intentional so that the user can be trained and understand the concept, tabs for the browser, desktops for the remote desktop application. And we offer a lot of neat capabilities there, including the ability for users on unmanaged PCs to very easily subscribe to work and enterprise resources and receive the app publishing features through that. In addition, as we mentioned before, we now offer full multi-touch remoting, and that is a feature that is both available for the Metro-style remote desktop app as well as the standard remote desktop client. And with that, let's switch to our first set of demos.
If you've seen either Steven Sinofsky's keynote or the demo I did yesterday at Bill Lang and Mike Neal's session on Windows Server 8, you'll note that we have a new Metro-style application that we want all our users to come to. We really want to make sure that there is one place where all users get to access all their remote apps and desktops, and that is the Metro-style remote desktop application in Windows 8. So let's jump right in. So what you see here is a bunch of favorite desktops that I've been connecting to. I've been using remote desktop for a while, so I've accumulated this set of favorites. The one thing you'll not see here is any apps that are published out to me by my IT administrator. I decided not to put any apps in for this portion of the demo as we are really focusing on the end user experience aspects in terms of graphics, multimedia, and touch. But you can always go back to the recording from yesterday's demo to see how it's very easy to get to your corporate published apps from even your personal device. All you need to do is enter in your email ID, just like you configure your Exchange server from your Outlook at your home. You just need to enter your email ID and log on to your corporate with your credentials, and you'll get access to your apps. We all have seen business apps like Excel and Word working great over remote desktop, so I'm not going to spend any time demoing that to you today. Before we jump into the remote desktop experience, I want to explore this app a little bit more. Look at this app. It's a Metro-style application. There are a bunch of tiles here with a snapshot of your last activity. Now, this is so that you get the personal feeling and you also know, hey, this was what I was doing on this desktop. For example, on one of these, I was playing Word Hunt. On the other, I was managing my server using Server Manager, etc. Now, one thing to note is I'm connecting to different kinds of desktops on the back end. There are remote desktop session host servers, formerly known as terminal servers, that are running the software GPU. There are also virtual machines that are again running the software rasterizer. There is also a physical desktop that is running a hardware GPU. So again, tying it back to what Nadeem just said, What we want to showcase here is that the endpoint, whether it's sessions, VMs, or physical desktops, and the GPU type, whether it's physical GPU, software GPU, or a virtual GPU in the RemoteFX vGPU case, don't matter. You truly get the same Metro-style, fully immersive, fast and fluid experience with a remote desktop and Windows 8. Now, let's explore this a little bit further. As you've seen in all the talks around Metro-style apps, the way to get to your app settings is to swipe from the right and tap on Settings. Obviously, on the bottom right corner, you see the system settings, but on the top, you see the app-specific remote desktop settings. The first one I'm going to get into is subscribe. Now, this is the email ID subscription part in order to get to your corporate apps and desktops. Obviously, I'm not going to show that like I mentioned earlier, but for completeness sake, I wanted to show you this email ID subscription. Let's go back again to the other settings that we have, and this time let's go into preferences. Now, like Nadeem mentioned, the goal of the Metro-style application is to make it extremely easy and fast for you to get to what you really need to get to. That is your remote desktops and apps. So we have done a bunch of smart defaults and do the right thing in terms of the adaptive graphics, the codec selection, and the transports that we use. And so what you see by default is the display settings are set to on, to choose automatically. And that basically means you let the system decide what is best for you based on your network conditions, your CPU usage, etc. Obviously, if you're a super user, you can turn this to off. And we have really simplified, even in this case, the kind of settings that you can set. You have a choice of 3. You can say low, medium, or high. And you can decide what is best for your current network conditions and desired experience. Now, for this part of the demo, I'm obviously going to leave it at the default. The other thing you're noticing is there is a place where you can put in your remote desktop gateway server name. This is very important because Remote Desktop Gateway is our SSL VPN kind of solution to let you connect to your corporate desktops or apps from your home machines, from your home network. And so it's very easy to pop in your Remote Desktop Gateway server name here. If you're on a home network, we'd first attempt to go through the gateway. If you're back on your corporate network, we'd actually bypass the gateway and directly connect you to your desktops or servers or apps. All right, so that's an overview of the settings that we provide. Now, one other thing that I want to show you actually before we get out of the settings is it says here control system access for remote desktop. So we provide basic access like you can turn on or off your microphone. So simple things like that. We give you choices on whether you want those to be used in your remote desktop session or not. Obviously, there's a bunch of app declarations that state that, hey, this app uses your internet connection, etc. Now, you can imagine this is a developer preview version, and so there will be a few more UI updates, I'm sure, to this app. And one of the things that I know is a scenario is, hey, not everybody may like a snapshot of their last usage in all scenarios on these tiles. And so one setting you can imagine that might show up here is the ability to turn that off. So that's just another thing I wanted to show. But now let's jump straight into the remote desktop. Now, I've been using this for a while. And so the first time I connected, obviously, I've had to provide my credentials to the remote desktop session. Now, these credentials could be my corporate credentials, the local account, or with Windows 8, even your live ID is supported. And so, since I've already done that, I've saved my credentials after the first time I entered those. And now, when I launch my remote desktop session, I tap on a tile and I'm straight in. I have no prompts whatsoever. I'm not, being asked to enter my credentials again. So let's do that. Tap on this green tile that says RDP demo-win8, and we'll be straight in. Now, how do you know you're in a remote desktop session? The UI paradigm, like Nadeem mentioned, is very similar to what you see in the Metro-style Internet Explorer. You either swipe from the top or the bottom to actually see that, hey, you're in your remote desktop session. Now, in the bottom app bar, we have many icons that give you information on your remote desktop session. One such icon is the connection icon. This gives you a nice little flyout with basic information like the PC name you're connected to, your bandwidth, and the round trip latency. Now you'll see more of this later when we talk about RemoteFX for WAN, because this data is being used not just as end user feedback, but also by our adaptive graphics and media remoting portions to actually dynamically adjust your experience as you go. There's obviously the home button, which if you press, you get back to home. You can very easily get back to your remote desktop session. Now, there are a few other icons that you see here that I'll get to, but first let's get to our apps, right? It's all about the apps. First thing I want to show you is a sample application that we have that demonstrates our multi-touch remoting, the RemoteFX multi-touch feature. Very easily, if I swipe one finger across this, you'll notice that we're actually capturing all the touch points. The pressure I apply determines the density of the touch points you see. This is not mouse to touch conversion. This is true touch remoting. Let's do the same thing with 2 touch points. Again, you'll see that it's smooth, fast, and fluid. Now, one question I get often is, hey, does the remote endpoint, does my server need to have touch capabilities? And the answer is no, right? Because all you need is multi-touch support on your local physical desktop, and beyond that, you can manage your headless servers, virtual machines, whatever with touch, right? Doesn't matter whether they're running Windows 7 or Windows 8. Obviously, if they're running Windows 8, they're going to get the new multi-touch capabilities along with full gesture support that has been introduced in Windows 8. But in some cases, in Windows 7, we might convert to mouse, but the user doesn't need to know. They're still interacting with their remote desktop session with touch. Now, there's one more thing I can show here, which is kind of geeky, but I think this is the right crowd to show it to. So, if you see here, when I press down my finger, you see that there is this yellow rectangle that you see around the center. This is the contact rectangle for my touch point. If I press 2 fingers down, like if I tap lightly, the density is different, but if I press hard, it's a bigger rectangle. The point here is that, multi-touch remoting gives you a lot of interesting little things that matter. Let's say you're trying to control a really small control in your remote desktop session, right? An icon, a close button or something. The multi-touch capabilities actually allow you to get to that. There is an estimation done as to what you're trying to touch, and the system decides that, hey, this is what the user is attempting to do. So the power of RemoteFX multi-touch is all these things you get inside a remote desktop session. Let's go further, right? Let's bring up a simple 3D application that you can interact using touch. First, single finger touch to actually rotate the model. This is eDrawings, by the way. It's a popular 3D app. And as you can see, the interactions are really fast and fluid. I mean, there's no difference between what you can imagine local versus remote. If you want to still make sure you're in a remote session, you really are, right? Also, we can use 2 fingers to zoom the model in and out. Again, really smooth interactions, still in a remote desktop session. All right, let's take it a notch higher and close this out and get to the Surface TouchPack suite of apps. So this is Microsoft Surface Globe, and you'll notice that we can interact with it again with touch. This is a 3D application, very smooth interactions. You really don't need to change the way you interact with your desktop, no matter if you're local or remote. You can zoom in, you can get a 3D view, zoom out. This is RemoteFX adaptive graphics and multi-touch working in combination to give you a great user experience. Now, one notch higher, let's get some multimedia, some audio into the mix, right? And let's launch the Surface TouchPack Lagoon app. Now, this is a full screen immersive application. You'll see some audio come through. It's really, really crisp graphics. And if I touch the screen, you'll notice that I can really scare the fishies away. The ripples on the pond are clear. The audio is smooth, everything over RDP. Once again, let's make sure we're still running inside the remote desktop session. And this is RemoteFX, adaptive graphics, touch, all working together for you for this great experience. Now, I want to take it a notch higher, right? We have media remoting in the mix, and let's put in some media and see how things look. So double click and bring up this web-based application that again, has some graphics. I can move the picture around. It also has video playing. And this is using our RemoteFX media remoting technologies to give you this super rich experience. Once again, very smooth. I can move the birdie around. Zoom in, zoom out with two-finger touch. And if I do it properly, I can even spin the bunny, right? So again, this is really, really smooth interactions. Let's all hold on and listen to this for a second and soak it all in. We can keep listening to this the whole day, but I'm going to move on and continue with other portions that I want to show you. Now, you've all heard about metro-style apps, right? So I want to bring up one of these apps. This is the RSS reader that you saw in a couple of demos. This is the Qt overload section of the RSS reader. Again, you see there are a lot of interesting things going on here. Text, graphics, media, the progressive rendering that Nadeem talked about is in play here. It's not very obvious because things are going so fast, but if I scroll around, you're actually rendering images and video in a progressive fashion. Now, the thing I actually want to show you is swipe from the bottom, and imagine a scenario where you have text like this that's not really very clear, and especially when you're connecting to a Windows 7 remote desktop, you want to zoom in and interact with that text. We have here the zoom feature that lets you use the local magnifier and actually zoom into content. You can easily move around, right? So for example, the interaction is just the same if you were using magnifier on your local PC. You can also pinch to actually zoom out or pinch back to zoom in. Once again, very, very seamless interactions, just like something you'd be used to locally. Now, there's two ways to get to your start menu or start screen on the remote desktop. One way I've been showing by hitting the start button when you're in the desktop, but the other way is using the Charms button in our app bar. So if I hit Charms, you'll see that it brings up the start menu in the remote server, and you can get back to your start screen. So once again, you're in your remote desktop session. Even the start screen, if you pan it around, experience is really smooth. This is rich DirectX content here, and you see that it's all fast and fluid as you would expect in a remote desktop session. That concludes the first part of my demos with adaptive graphics, multi-touch, and media remoting. I'm going to hand it back to Nadeem to take us through further, and I'll be back with more exciting demos. Thank you very much.
Okay, so there you have it. We're obviously very, very excited about the adaptive graphics capabilities, the Metro-style remote desktop app, and multi-touch. But there's more. RemoteFX for WAN really addresses the problem that we alluded to earlier, where we had previously been able to offer a very good experience if you had a high bandwidth network, such as a corporate network or LAN. But people want to be able to connect, and our users have been telling us that they want to be able to connect from broader types of networks. And once we started looking at this, the taxonomy, the numbers of types of networks is tremendous. Certainly there's well-known ones, 3G, there's the Wi-Fi networks, and even that has many different variants. And then you have transcontinental networks. You have certainly many companies that have remote workers. You may want to work from home. And many people have great bandwidth from home with Fios and cable, but sometimes that's not the case, or sometimes you're at a hotel, such as a conference like this. And so we want to be able to do improvements to the RemoteFX technology to be able to offer a really great experience in all of those cases. But given the number of different types of networks available, we chose to make a model where we think of the key problems with networks. And essentially, the problems that we can identify that cause remoting to be challenging can be summarized, even though they're quite complex and broad, can be summarized in these three categories. Latency is basically ping time. It's the time it takes for packets to travel from one end to the other. And at some point, the speed of light comes into effect, and if you have far too much latency, then there's a challenge there. But there's quite a range where physics is not the issue. It's the actual way that protocols work across networks. And specifically, the remote FX protocol to date, before Windows 8, has primarily been running on TCP, which is optimized and terrific for things like web browsing and file transfers and sort of these bulk data loading, but not as efficient for latency and packet loss. And so packet loss is the next type of challenge, and that can take many different forms. And we actually have a lot of internal simulations and a lot of internal data that sort of categorizes it and makes mathematical models so that we can tune our entire stack to that. And packet loss takes forms from burst. A good way to think of burst packet loss is if you're on Wi-Fi and you start microwaving something, you lose all your packets. That's burst packet loss. But random packet loss also occurs. And there are distributions for that, statistical distributions that we have and we model, where essentially you might lose a few packets here and there. And the challenge for a protocol like RemoteFX with interactive and high response is any one packet that's lost can cause a glitch or a stutter. And that's something we really want to avoid. So going back to what I just mentioned, again, we have new UDP type capabilities with a lot of additional intelligent things that can compensate for that. And the final sort of way to characterize challenging networks is limited bandwidth. You don't always have a lot of bandwidth. And certainly everything we talked about in the first section of the talk in terms of RemoteFX adaptive graphics directly helps there. Because anything we can do to reduce the amount of bandwidth that we need to use for those scenarios where it's not available will come into play, and RemoteFX will be more aggressive at encoding when that is necessary. However, if you are in the corporate network and you have plenty of bandwidth, it can trade off differently and basically give you more scale with less encoding, all automatically. So what have we done then to address the WAN challenge? We've essentially combined the technologies in the first part of the talk, the RemoteFX adaptive graphics, which itself is network aware, with new intelligent WAN aware transports. And these offer the ability to use UDP where it's available. And I want to make a very important distinction here. We don't require UDP. The RemoteFX technology will automatically sense if UDP is available, and if so, will offload the types of content that are necessary on UDP. But if UDP is not available, or policy by the administrator dictates that that's not something that you want to deploy in your environment, it can very easily and naturally fall back to TCP. And of course, being Windows, we definitely pay attention to the fundamentals. And so even when we are on UDP, we offer very, very tight security, just as we do on the TCP channel, where we've always offered the latest industry standard type security, such as SSL. For TCP, there's an analog for that on UDP, so you can be safe with your traffic. And then another important point is all of these technologies are available and integrated into the next version of Remote Desktop Gateway. And so if you're at home and you're connecting to your corporation, the latest generation Remote Desktop Gateway will let you send that UDP traffic across the internet where it's most needed to overcome latency and packet losses and things like that. And then at the gateway site, we'll receive that UDP traffic and do the right thing in terms of getting the traffic into the corporation. So the goal overall for all of this is really to deliver a really great experience beyond the corporate network. And we feel that in our usage tests, we were able to offer dramatically improved experience there. And just before we get to the demos, I'm going to give you a little bit more of a flavor of the internals. And again, this is illustrative. This is not necessarily every little detail, and this is quite complex and busy anyway. But what I want to highlight is RemoteFX is more than just RemoteFX adaptive graphics. RemoteFX includes all the things like input, which takes multiple forms from mouse, keyboard, and now the latest generation touch, but also includes device redirection, includes support for audio, includes support for video. And what I'm showing here is one topology that can happen, where we're either deciding by policy or RemoteFX is sensing that it's not able to establish a UDP connection. And so you're running in a more traditional TCP transport. However, even then, a lot of improvements have happened in that transport that make much better use of the network and seek to optimize how we transport the data. And so even then, if you compare side by side with Windows 8, latest generation, to the previous version, you will find you will have a better experience. And in addition to that, we have rich auto-sensing capabilities. Gaurav showed in the demo the connection tab that basically displays your connection. That's not just for the end user to see, although it is useful for diagnosing certain problems. It also is used quite extensively internally by the RemoteFX adaptive graphics to tune and change how encoding happens depending on what the network is doing, and to optimize how packets are multiplexed, how the transport is efficiently trying to get the most performance possible out of the network. Now, the other configuration is some of the streams or channels within RemoteFX can be offloaded to a separate transport. And in this case, the UDP transport, which is obviously a lot more than just a switch from TCP to UDP. It involves a lot of deep technology in there to recover from losses where necessary, and in some cases, changes across the entire stack all the way up to media. And so, for example, if you're watching video, we can do very intelligent things such as not recover by retransmitting, but letting things self-heal and correct because the codecs are able to cooperate with the transport. So really, it's deep investments across the whole stack. It's not just a layer thing. It's not just a switch from TCP to UDP. It's RemoteFX adaptive graphics plus RemoteFX for WAN working together to deliver a great experience. But rather than just tell you about it, let's show you. Do you need to switch it to that one? Okay.
The earlier part didn't get recorded.
We'll fix it later.
All right, thank you, Nadeem. So the WAN portions are the most exciting part, and I'm going to hold it for like 5 minutes or so before I show you the WAN demo. But one thing that we all know is that no remote desktop experience is complete without you being able to access your local devices. Graphics and multimedia are great, but for most real-world business usage, you may want to print or you may want to access your local scanner or your local webcam and things like that. So to demonstrate that, I have one such interesting device for you. We have a USB missile launcher clubbed with a webcam sitting on top, which is an isochronous device. So we're going to send isoc traffic over RDP. Now this is obviously a cooked up device. We taped the webcam onto the USB missile launcher, but it's pretty cool. It's entertaining, right? So let's look at our good old MSTSC. We're going to do this demo with MSTSC just to show that it still exists. And if I edit my RDP file and go into local resources, more, and you'll see that, hey, we have the LifeCam and the USB input device that are both selected for redirection. Now, not many of you may know, but if you hit the options on MSTSC, there's actually a lot of stuff in there, right? So there's a lot of features. You can configure your audio, video quality, redirect devices, and things like that. So that's the MSTSC part. Let's connect up. And one thing you'll notice is we're now in the remote desktop session. Now, if this were a terminal server, or what we now call remote desktop session host, so you're already seeing it's attempting to install the LifeCam software. I don't really need it. I'll use the inbox webcam software, webcam drivers. But going back to the point, if you were on a session host, we now support USB redirection on sessions too, right? And we actually give you full security, which means if you have one session going with a particular device redirected, you will not see that device in any other session on the shared session host. This is really, really important to enable true deployments, because without proper session isolation, somebody else on the server may be seeing what you're doing on your webcam, right? That's really not cool. So let's get started. First up, we'll use a true developer tool, namely GraphEdit, right, to actually see the webcam in action. As you can see, as I move my hand, it's pretty responsive. The frame rate is good. This is isochronous data going over remote desktop. But hey, that's not cool enough, right? So let's put this on the side and launch. Wait for it. We need audio on. A Flash application to control the missile launcher. How about that, right? So this is Flash over remote desktop. I'm going to watch for anybody is hungry, ready to go to sleep. And I really hope the security guys don't come in, but we have some time, right? Let's do one more. I mean, it's really fun. I mean, I keep doing this all the time in office. And please be sure to return the evidence. All right, so that's USB redirection. I mean, this was a fun way to illustrate the point, but you can now use your VoIP phones, your webcams, any USB device that is supported, you can use over remote desktop. Okay, so last part, let's close all this out and get to the WAN demo. Now, there are two parts to this WAN demo, right? One is we want to show just the bandwidth improvement gains, like Nadeem mentioned. In certain cases, we have huge bandwidth improvement gains because of the new RemoteFX media remoting codecs that we use, like the Inbox H.264 codec with Windows 8. So I'm going to illustrate that with an RDP7 versus RDP8 comparison, meaning connecting up to a Windows Server 2008 R2 server and then to a Windows Server 8. And then the second part is I'm going to put it on a WAN link and actually demonstrate a side-by-side performance of how you can, what your experience would have been with Windows Server 2008 R2 versus with Windows Server 8. Now, that is a pretty complex setup, and so I have a video recorded of this whole section that I'm going to play, and I'm going to talk you through it, because I don't have a WAN emulator here to set up that kind of, to actually make that kind of setup right here. And also, in the interest of time, this is very useful to do. So let's go full screen. Now, I have Task Manager open, and I want to draw your attention to sort of the bandwidth usage part, like right here. And we're going to play the video and audio, and you'll see what the experience is like. First up, I'm going to do it on Windows Server 2008 R2, right? And fire up Internet Explorer. Again, you'll notice that this is a LAN connection. We have not still introduced latency or loss into the setup. Watch for the network bandwidth utilization, and let's see what happens. You'd have noticed that the user experience is pretty good, but here we go.
As they head into the Palace Hilton, Francesco builds an early lead. Oh, hang on, boys. Here comes the dirt. Slipping and sliding, baby. McLean, it's time to make your move.
So, that's reasonable, performance. You're getting your video quality, but if you see the bandwidth usage, we're using between 30 and 50 megabits per second, depending on what portion of the video you're on, right? That's really not great when you're in a corporate environment and a single user takes up that much bandwidth. So now let's see the Windows Server 8 experience with the same video. Again, watch for the bandwidth usage.
Francesco builds an early lead. Oh, hang on, boys. Here comes the dirt. Slipping and sliding, baby. McLean, it's time to make your move. Get on the outside and show them what Doc done taught you.
So what you notice there is the user experience is on par. In some cases, you'll see it's even better. but the bandwidth usage was down to like 3 to 5 megabits per second. That's nearly a 90% reduction in playing media over remote FX in Windows Server 8. So that's really, really great for IT administrators because now you're not going to have one person take up all your bandwidth. If you're in countries like Europe where you're getting metered networks, you're not going to have a bill that you're going to pay through your nose. So next up, let's do a side-by-side comparison of Windows Server 2008 R2 or Windows 7. You're going to see it being snapped on the left, and Windows 8. And this time, we're on a WAN network. So first, I'm going to open up the Windows 8 remote desktop session to just show you that we have the same set of bars. You'll notice that in the connection bar, you see that there's one bar less because it's a WAN situation. And you have minimal bandwidth, you have 60 milliseconds round trip latency, and in this case we also show you that hey, the UDP transport is actually on. Now this is typical of a coast-to-coast United States type network. If you have your data center in the Bay Area and your offices in New Jersey, you'll see this kind of a setup, and that's what we are demonstrating here, right? So let's play the video and move a little bit ahead. So, on the left is Windows 7, on the right is Windows 8. Just to be fair, I'm going to start the Windows 7 video first, the one I expect to be slow, and then I'm going to start the Windows 8 on the right after that, right? And audio is coming only from Windows 8. I mean, I've muted audio on Windows 7.
Hang on, boys. Here comes the dirt. Slipping and sliding, baby. McLean, it's time to make your move. Get on the outside and show them what Doc done taught you. 10-4, Mater. Oh, boy. Francesco's brought to a screeching halt. Lightning McQueen is the first to take advantage. And just like that, folks, Francesco's lead is left in the dust.
I think we all see it. On the left, you're not seeing video. You're actually seeing a slideshow, right? On the right is really good quality video, even on this constrained WAN network. And that's Remote FX for WAN in action for you. This is just the beginning. We want to show many more demos in the coming months with sort of various WAN configurations. But in the developer preview build, this is something that you can try out of the box. When you're on your home Wi-Fi network, just check it out. All right? So there's one more thing. I think we're getting to the stage where we want to take questions. But I know this crowd's going to like this. So I'm going to go back to the Metro Style app and actually show you how you interact with multiple remote desktops when you're at home or at work. Right? This is a very common thing. Many of us do this all the time. So I have here, one desktop that's open, and if I go back and connect to another desktop, you'll see that you can very easily interact with both your desktops. So for example, you want to switch between the two. It's just like switching between tabs in Internet Explorer 10. This is really easy, fast to do. You can see what which desktop you're connecting to and switch around. But that's not all, right? You come here and let's launch our Lagoon app and go back local. And let's say I want to play a game, right? While I'm at work, I want to play a game. I get to 5 in a row and I'm playing. But I want to keep a watch on my remote desktops. What do? I use the new Snap feature in Windows 8 to actually swipe from the left and snap your remote desktops, right? So you have a live preview of your remote desktops going. We made really good use of all the things that Jensen talked about in terms of Metro style principles on day one. You can see the fishies are still moving. If you tap on them, you can actually interact with them, right? Actually, I dismissed the screensaver, but you get the point. So this is, this closes out all my demos. I'm going to hand it back to Nadeem to wrap up.
Okay. Thank you, Gaurav. Okay, so there you have it. Remote FX for WAN, Remote FX Adaptive Graphics, and the new Metro-style remote desktop app. Exciting stuff. You guys have the bits. We look forward to you guys playing with it, hearing your feedback. And as Gaurav said, this is just the beginning. We expect over the coming period to be able to share more, and we'd love to hear your feedback. So with that, to recap, RemoteFX in Windows Server 8 is really a huge leap forward. It really delivers a great touch-friendly experience, delivers the fast and fluid Metro-style remote desktop, and supports a wide range of networks. Okay, in terms of related sessions, there was a session immediately preceding ours. I know you can't time travel, but it will be online. If you're interested in the space, it probably is going to be relevant to some extent. And then especially the session immediately following ours in this room is presented by our colleagues Rob and Karthik, and it's focused on the RemoteFX thin client and partner opportunity. So if you're interested in being part of this exciting space and helping to enhance it with the new thin clients and more on RemoteFX, I definitely encourage you to attend, and I believe it is in this room. Is that right?
Yes, it is in this room. I also want to add that we have a booth on the show floor. Ben Meister, our colleague here, is in charge of the booth. And all the stuff I showed you here is available for you to go and play with there, including the 30 touchpoint 3M monitor that you can go really bonkers on, right? So if you're passing by, please feel free to stop by the Windows server. Actually, it's the server and cloud section, and we're going to be there all day today and tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Questions, please step up to the mics, or if you prefer to come by afterwards and talk to us in person, we'll be here for a little while.